was the 7th of May in 2015. A day that started off like any other. I put my suit and tie on and I headed into the city to work. But that day my father called me and he said, "Hey son, I need to go away on a business trip tonight to India." That was about all that was normal about that day. In fact, it was probably the last normal day of my life as I would know it. Because that day my father called me from the airport and off he flew. My father flew to India, but he never returned. For 3 weeks, my dad was missing until I discovered his fate. He'd been murdered. My whole world froze. I froze. And then eventually my emotions, they went into overdrive, as I found myself then at 23 embroiled in a murder investigation that continued to this present day. It was an incredibly difficult time, and I took 3 months out from work to lead the investigation. But eventually I wanted to go back to work. But my first day back to the office didn't go as expected. You see, that first day back, I went back, as did many of my colleagues who worked there. But a colleague who I joined the company, he and I walked into the office that day, but he never walked out. You see, inside my colleague was a story that only if he had the confidence to speak up, the right environment, he might still be with us today. A story that perhaps if as leaders and employees we had the right skills to actively listen, he might still be here today. My colleague took his own life that day. And that afternoon I sat outside the office and I thought, how can we make workplaces more human? Where everybody has a voice and everybody can speak up and get the right support. And as time went on, I started to notice something quite profound. Was that every time I shared my story, a colleague shared more about them in return. The more I shared, the more they shared. And I noticed that storytelling doesn't make us less professional, it makes us more human. It creates incredible bonds within teams. It creates leaders who aspire to be like. And then I noticed the leaders who are most inspiring, those who I'd look up to, they were real, they were human, but they had something about them. And it was that they'd taken time to understand who they were. They were self-aware, and that in itself was inspiring. But then I looked wider in society, and I started to notice a trend. And I started to question, we all have a past, we all have a story. But it seemed that we could either run from it, fail to address it, just block it out, keep on going. Or should we pause? Should we take time to confront it, address our past head on and understand it? Now, I myself struggled. I thought, we must keep on going, must not stop. But then one day I paused, I stopped. I went into my past, confronted it head on. Was it emotional? Absolutely. And was it difficult? Sure, it was. But it was also one of the most rewarding, powerful, therapeutic experiences of my life. And from that moment, I started to understand the power of unlocking our past and unlocking our own stories. But then back at work, I kept seeing the need that workplaces were not feeling human again. Those leaders were few and far between who were really human. I thought we've got to do more. How do we humanize the working world? How do we put the H back in HR? That's human resources, but we're not seeing enough. How do we create leaders who recognize that being a human leader and being an effective leader are not mutually exclusive, but it's a necessary partnership? And I sat there and I thought, I'm going to have to drive the change. I've got to do more. And so I took the leap of faith. I left the corporate world behind. And I launched an organization today bringing together the world's most powerful storytellers to help people unlock their stories, to showcase to employees and leaders that understanding our past can be the greatest gift to understanding ourselves. And from a small idea that started with very little in my bedroom, today I'm so proud to have supported over 2 million people. We all have a story, and it's incredibly powerful. But who am I to say that this is effective? Yes, I speak here from my personal experience, but it's not just me. You see, the greatest leaders, the greatest change makers in history, they've always understood this one thing. They've understood the power of unlocking their story, their personal experiences, to drive forward a better future. When we look at the human rights advocate, Malala Yousafzai, she shares her story of being shot by the Taliban for suggesting that girls should go to school. She uses her story and her past and experience today to drive forward for equality in the world. When Martin Luther King stood and delivered his speech, "I have a dream," he didn't pull out statistics and reports. He spoke from the heart. He spoke of past experience to lead the civil rights movement in the United States. But just like that, everybody has a story. Every single one of us in the room, anybody watching this online, we all have a story. But unlocking our story, well, that's the powerful ingredient. But that's enough about others. It's enough about me, because what about you? You've got a story. For me, talk is cheap and I like action. So what I'd love to do is I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey into your life. And in a moment, not just yet, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. And when I ask you to do so, all I want you to do is to visualize whatever comes to mind as I take you on a journey of your life. And when we come back together, we're going to unpick this a little bit more. So if you're ready, I just invite you to get comfortable in your seat. And when you're ready, just close your eyes. Now, I'd like you to visualize in your mind, maybe an image of you when you were younger. And as you do that, I'd like you to bring to mind your earliest childhood memory. You might not remember everything, but perhaps a time, who was around you. And from that moment, I then invite you to think about you being at school, maybe your favorite teacher. You picture your classmates and your friends. And thinking about how school life was for you. The positive experience, maybe any negative. And then flowing through your home life. Who was at home with you whilst you were growing up? Any key figures? And as you grew up at home, were there any challenges that started to come your way? And then maybe thinking about when you first became a teenager. Maybe a sense of independence. How did that feel in your teenage years? And then maybe later in your teen years, did you move to a new city? Go to university? Perhaps starting your first job? Just picturing yourself. And are there any challenges, any curveballs that came your way in these years? And then what I'd like you to do is just slowly flowing through your life to the present moment today of any key moments that come up. And then just visualize yourself right now in the room. And when you're ready, just open your eyes. Now what I'd like you to do as I welcome you back is I'd like you to bring to the forefront of your mind just one moment. Just the standout moment in your mind right now. It might be the most recent, it might be a dark place, but just bring one moment to the forefront. And what I'd like you to do is, thinking of that moment, think about one thing that you've learned from that experience. This is often quite difficult. But the best learnings don't have to be huge. A simple reminder is one of the most powerful reminders. Think about one thing from that moment that's made you who you are today. It's not always easy. But I share that because from every single moment in our lives come so many rich learnings. Many of us can focus just on the moment. We share the story of the moment, but it's actually the learning that's the richness, the learning that we can share with others. See, as the famous saying goes, hindsight is the best insight. That's hindsight looking back can actually give us the greatest insight for our path forward. And for me, we don't move on from our past. We move on with our past. It need not define us, but it could certainly support us. And so when we look at these rich learnings, why do they matter? Why, when I share the examples of Malala or Martin Luther King, or your examples today, what can you do with the learnings? Well, it's twofold. You see, the first power in looking at the learnings from your past is to understand ourselves. You can become more self-aware. That moment has taught me something in my life, and I'm going to take it forward. But many of us fail to bring it to the forefront. But the second most powerful tool of that learning is when you share your experience with others, with colleagues, with friends, with families. When you share a story, a moment in your life, don't just stop at the moment. Share how that's made you who you are. Share the rich learning. Because it's these learnings that can open up others' minds to new experiences, new ways of life. But it's ever more powerful. You see, the ripple effect from every single story in this room and everybody online, it's unique. You see, storytelling can change lives, and storytelling can save lives. Your story really does have the ability not just to change your world, but to have a greater impact on the world. We all have a story. But where do we go from today? Is this just going to be, I went to TEDx and I saw this guy, Gian Power, talk about learnings and stories and off I go into the world? No. Instead, I'd like you to make a pact with me, a promise from you to me, that in the coming days after today, you can find 30 minutes. There's 1,440 minutes in a day. I hope you can give me 30. And find yourself in a relaxed mood, a neutral mood perhaps, and in an environment that makes you feel at ease. Take the time to flow through that visual exercise. If it takes you 1 minute or 10 minutes, that's fine. And then map out in a list all of the key moments in your life. And for each one, map out the learnings. That might be that you're a twin and you see competition in a different way. It might be that you're an only child and you communicate differently. Or perhaps there is a dark moment in your past. But think about how that's made you the incredible, unstoppable human being who you are. Ultimately, the past can be difficult. But I truly, truly believe that when we unlock our story, we can unlock a greater future by understanding the lessons. I can't change the past. None of us can. I can't bring my father back. But I promise you, if you take the time to understand the learnings from your story, you'll create an unstoppable you for the future. So together, let's take the time and let's drive change one story at a time. Thank you.